What if I told you that your DNA contains a ridiculous typo that could blind you at the worst possible moment? Ordinary sunlight triggers a massive respiratory explosion in your body, clocking in at 300 kilometers per hour, and you physically can't stop it. It's not a defense mechanism or a medical condition. It's pure biophysical noise, making our brain mix up vision with touch. Time to find out how nature cut corners on insulating your nerves. Until evolution rolls out a patch to fix the short circuit between your eye and your nose, the only thing you can control is the like button on this video. Subscribe to get regular doses of cold scientific cynicism, and drop a comment if you're one of those people who sneezes in bursts of 3. Back in 1981, US military medics ran into a problem that would fit perfectly in an absurd comedy, except it was threatening fighter pilots at supersonic speeds. Picture this. An elite pilot breaks through thick, gloomy clouds into bright sunlight. Instead of completing their mission, they instantly turn into a snotty catapult, convulsing in a series of frantic sneezes. At the speed of sound, closing your eyes for even half a second means flying blind for hundreds of meters. Landing a jet on an aircraft carrier like that? A great way to spectacularly trash both the plane and yourself. An article in Military Medicine officially confirmed the bitter truth. The latest fighter jet is useless if its pilot's wiring shorts out from daylight. Scientists called this magnificent biological glitch the Photic sneeze reflex. But apparently, doctors have a sense of humor too, so the official classification stuck with the acronym ACHOO. In Latin, that stands for Autosomal Dominant Compelling Helio-Ophthalmic Outburst. Sounds like a spell from a cheap fantasy novel, but really, it's just a polite way to describe how you twitch awkwardly when you look at the sun. 1 in 3 of you just nodded in understanding, because up to 35% of the world's population carries this defect. If you're one of them, I've got news. You're not special, you're just stuck with a faulty relay. The funny part is, people with this glitch often genuinely believe that sneezing at the sun is a basic human function. Nope. The other 2/3 of humanity can look at the sun without wanting to blow out their lungs. To them, you look as weird as a car that pops its trunk open when you turn on the high beams. Most carriers of this reflex think it's a cute quirk, but on the road, that cute quirk can easily turn you into ground meat. Exiting a dark tunnel onto a bright highway becomes a game of roulette. At 60 miles per hour, you're flying blind for about 80 meters while your eyelids clamp shut. Your brain is totally overloaded processing the spasm. You're not in control of the road, you're just hoping physics is on your side today. The worst part is, this explosion is completely pointless. A normal sneeze is a brilliant defense mechanism. Dust gets in, your body expels it at hurricane speed. But when you look at the sun, there's nothing in your nose but air. Your brain throws a full-blown cardiorespiratory drama. Pressure of 100 millimeters of mercury, heart rhythm disruption, all for nothing. It's like calling the fire department to put out a picture of a campfire on your TV screen. From a bioengineering standpoint, our body is designed as if an intoxicated intern assembled it on a Friday evening. Sneezing with your eyes open is physically impossible. Your brain firmly locks your eyelids to protect your eyeballs from pressure changes. And this entire complex safety system kicks in just because you stepped outside without sunglasses. Why are some people's visual pathways completely sealed off, while others have exposed wires that spark at the first flash? This mystery has plagued humanity for 2,000 years. Aristotle was the first to tackle it. The great Greek came up with a theory that made sense in antiquity, but today just makes you smile. His authority weighed on science for 2 millennia, until one English lord decided to run an experiment that literally shut Aristotle up. And all it took was for the lord to stand in the sun with his eyes closed. Aristotle was certainly a great ancient mind, but when it came to biology, his logic sometimes resembled a 5-year-old who got into dad's library. In the 4th century BCE, in his scientific work, Problems, he decided to explain why people sneeze in the sun. The philosopher sat down, thought, and delivered a masterpiece of ancient thought. The sun's warmth heats the outside of the nose, causing the moisture inside to evaporate. This hot vapor rises, tickles the nostrils, and achoo! Beautiful, yes. Logical. For someone who never tried testing his own hypotheses. Sure, the problem was that Aristotle's authority was so unshakable that no one dared challenge his steam theory for almost 2,000 years. People obediently went into the sun, sneezed, and thought about the steam boiling in their nostrils. Aristotle's steam conspiracy held until the 17th century, when the English philosopher and founder of the scientific method, Francis Bacon, entered the scene. Bacon had a rare quality for his time. He preferred to test theories in practice rather than just take ancient Greeks at their word. His experiment to debunk Aristotle went down in science history as one of the cheapest and most effective. Bacon simply stepped into bright sunlight, tightly blindfolded his eyes with a thick cloth, and faced the sun. The sun's rays beat down on his face. According to Aristotle, steam should have been evaporating by the ton. But Bacon stood there, getting warm, and didn't sneeze. The moment he removed the blindfold and opened his eyes to the sky, an immediate sneezing volley. It was a crushing defeat for ancient physiology. Bacon proved something incredible for his time. Heat had nothing to do with it. The trigger was exclusively light hitting the retina. That means the command to expel non-existent dirt from your nose comes not from skin receptors, but from the visual organ. But the scientific community of the time just scratched their heads and decided to file this information away on a back shelf. Big deal. Bacon stood with his eyes closed. Who cares when the plague is raging all around? It wasn't until the mid-20th century that anyone really took the problem seriously. In 1964, American neurologist Henry Everett published a study in the journal Neurology that finally stripped the photic sneeze reflex of its mystical aura. Everett approached the issue with the meticulousness of a forensic investigator. He examined hundreds of patients and uncovered something astonishing. This reflex is an absolute equal opportunity phenomenon. It doesn't care about your gender, race, social status, diet, or which hemisphere you were born in. It's pure, unadulterated genetic lottery. But Everett's most intriguing discovery was the reflex's dependence on the spectral composition of light. Turns out, our brain doesn't react the same way to just any light hitting the eyes. A regular incandescent bulb, with its soft, yellowish spectrum, almost never triggers a sneeze. But blue light and harsh ultraviolet wavelengths act on the nervous system like a red rag to a bull. The retina reacts to short-wave radiation with maximum fury. That's why sunlight, packed with UV, can trigger a convulsive spasm in a split second. A flash of blue or white light is a direct signal to kick off the reflex arc. The connection between light wavelength and diaphragm movement seemed absurd. Imagine you press the brightness key on your keyboard, and your printer suddenly starts spewing random characters and smoking. That's roughly what's happening inside the heads of 35% of people. Light makes the eyes want to constrict, but instead, the body executes a convulsive exhale, spraying saliva on everyone nearby. Everett's discoveries only raised more questions. It became clear that inside the skulls of Achu syndrome carriers, there's some kind of anomalous pathway that directly links the visual analyzer to the respiratory center. But how exactly is this secret route wired? How do two incredibly complex nerve clusters, which should completely ignore each other, stage an unauthorized rally in our head at the first flash of light? Time to look inside the cranium and figure out why human anatomy resembles the chaotic wiring of an old house, where turning on a hairdryer gives you a shock from the bathroom faucet. If you hired an electrician who ran high-voltage power cables right next to delicate internet wires with zero shielding, you'd probably refuse to pay for that job. But evolution did exactly that with our heads. Inside the skull, there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. They control everything, from your ability to see, to moving your tongue, to smelling. Normally, each of these biological cables is wrapped in its own insulating sheath of myelin. This stuff works like high-quality electrical tape, preventing electrical impulses from jumping from one wire to another. But for 35% of the world's population, that wiring job was done on the absolute cheapest budget. The main suspects in our story are the optic nerve and the trigeminal nerve. The optic nerve shoves gigabytes of visual data from your retina straight to the occipital lobe. The trigeminal nerve? That's a sensitivity monster, splitting into 3 major branches that collect signals from your entire face. We care about the first branch, the ophthalmic nerve. Despite the name, it doesn't just serve your eye tissues, it also handles the upper nasal cavity. That's the exact junction that decides when you need to sneeze. When dust or pepper hits your nose, the trigeminal nerve fires a panic signal to the medulla oblongata. The respiratory center tells your diaphragm, "Fire away," and you let out a life-saving exhale. But in people with the achoo syndrome, these two nerves run through the brainstem so close together that their bioelectric fields start to overlap. That's a physical phenomenon physiologists call ephaptic transmission, or, as any sysadmin would tell you, plain old crosstalk. When you step into sunlight, the optic nerve gets hammered. A massive current surges through it. Because of a defect in the myelin insulation, part of that voltage literally spills over into the neighboring trigeminal nerve. The brain receives a false distress signal from the nose. It's too primitive to realize this is just an echo from bright light. To the brain, the situation looks clear. Something foreign is in your nostril, and you need to blow it out, now. So you obediently follow that false alarm. If that absurdity isn't enough, neuroscientists have a second, even more elaborate theory. It's called parasympathetic generalization. Imagine you send an email to a nearby department, but because the mailman is lazy, the whole office gets a copy. When bright light hits your eyes, the brain has to constrict your pupils fast to avoid frying the retina. That's the pupillary light reflex, managed by the Edinger-Westphal nucleus and the ciliary ganglion. The problem is, the same neural pathways also control tear production and blood flow to the nasal mucosa. In people with photic sneezes, the pupil constriction signal is so strong that it floods the neighboring channels. Blood vessels in the nose instantly dilate. The lining swells a bit, receptors get irritated, and you're grabbing for a tissue again. Both theories agree on one thing. A sun sneeze isn't a disease. It's a purely physical architectural flaw. A hardware bug, a glitch in the system that no software update can fix. You can't will your nerves not to short circuit, any more than you can will a broken socket to stop sparking when you plug something in. The answer to the big question in this video is absurdly simple. We sneeze in sunlight because our brains never mastered proper cable management in the brainstem. So we've cracked the anatomical mystery of this short circuit. The picture is clear: cheap insulation, crosstalk, false signals. But that raises a much deeper question. If this is a design flaw, why hasn't evolution fixed it over millions of years? Why has this bug been faithfully passed down from generation to generation, etched into the deepest layers of our DNA? To find out, we'll need to zoom in to the molecular level and discover that this ridiculous typo connects us to creatures that roamed the Earth back when dinosaurs still ruled. Genetics is an ironic lady, and sometimes what she hands down isn't a family castle or a rare eye color, but uncontrollable spasms. The achoo syndrome is inherited in an autosomal dominant pattern. In plain English, that means the gene behind this reflex has an extremely aggressive personality. It only needs to be present in one parent to have a 50% chance of showing up in their child. There's no complex combinatorics or recessive weighting game across generations. If your father sneezes when he looks at the sun, chances are you'll do the same, dutifully passing that baton onto your own kids. For a long time, the genetic marker for this glitch remained elusive. The breakthrough came in 2010, when the biotech company 23andMe decided to run a large-scale genome-wide association study. They analyzed the DNA of over 10,000 of their customers, matching their survey responses against millions of genetic variants. The result was striking. The researchers found a specific typo on chromosome 2. This marker, given the dry code name RS10427255, sits right next to the ZEB2 gene. A bit later, another associated marker was discovered, RS118569553. The ZEB2 gene itself codes for a protein that plays a fundamental role in embryonic development. It controls how nerve cells divide and migrate during the earliest stages of fetal formation. ZEB2 literally conducts the construction of the brain and the laying down of major neural pathways. A tiny mutation in this area causes the blueprint for that wiring to shift slightly during embryogenesis. The optic and trigeminal nerves end up too close together in the brainstem, So your photic sneeze isn't something you picked up during life, it's a fundamental flaw in the building's foundation, laid down when you were the size of a grape. But the most intriguing part emerges when we look beyond humans. Veterinarians have long noticed that the photic sneeze reflex occurs in domestic dogs and cats. You've probably seen it. Your dog runs onto a sunlit lawn, suddenly freezes, and lets out a classic achoo. That's not an allergy to grass. These animals suffer from the same short circuit in the brainstem. The trigeminal and optic pathways are in close spatial contact. The fact that this bug shows up across different classes of mammals tells us one thing: this isn't a recent human mutation. It's an ancient evolutionary artifact. So why hasn't natural selection wiped this error out over millions of years? The answer lies in evolution's brutal logic. Selection ruthlessly eliminates only those mutations that reduce an individual's chances of surviving to reproductive age and leaving offspring. If the defect doesn't mess with your ability to reproduce, evolution couldn't care less. The photic sneeze didn't lower the survival rate of prehistoric hunters on the savanna. Sure, they'd sneeze amusingly when coming out of dark caves into the light, but it didn't stop them from hunting and passing that broken gene on. Nature works on a good enough principle, as long as that principle doesn't lead to the species' immediate death. For millions of years, this glitch was nothing but harmless evolutionary noise. A weird brain short circuit, just a quirky detail of our biology. But evolution never saw it coming. That one day, a primitive primate would build a high-speed civilization, carve out dark tunnels, invent supersonic jets, and perform delicate microsurgeries under blazing surgical lights. At that moment, an ancient, harmless typo in the DNA suddenly turned into a hidden threat, capable of triggering a catastrophic chain reaction at any second. In today's urban environment, this ancient bug stops being a funny quirk. The most obvious example? Traffic. Picture a driver emerging from a long underground tunnel onto a highway flooded with midday sun. Eyes that have adjusted to the dimness get hit by a brutal blast of light. For someone with Achoo syndrome, the short circuit fires instantly. At 60 miles per hour, during a triple sneeze, that's about 3 to 4 seconds of forced blindness and lost focus. The car travels nearly 100 meters completely out of control. Road safety data shows that accident rates near tunnel exits spike on sunny days. Drivers blame the glare, but the real culprit runs deeper, an involuntary spasm of the diaphragm. But even more terrifying scenarios play out in sterile operating rooms. Modern eye and brain surgery relies on powerful shadowless LED or halogen lamps. A focused beam of insane intensity hits the patient's face. If the procedure is done under local anesthesia or sedation with the patient still awake, a sudden flash from the lamp can trigger the photic sneeze reflex. For a neurosurgeon working with micro-instruments inside brain tissue, or an ophthalmologist stitching a retina, an unexpected, uncontrollable sneeze from the patient is a disaster. A single sharp head movement by a fraction of a millimeter can turn a precision procedure into a tragedy with irreversible consequences. To prevent this, anesthesiologists have to take extreme measures. Before delicate maneuvers, they block branches of the trigeminal nerve with local anesthetics, essentially disabling the faulty wire in the patient's brain. The absurdity of it all? This reflex has absolutely no evolutionary benefit. A normal sneeze is a survival triumph, clearing the lungs of dust and germs. The photic sneeze is pure biological spam, a system failure that wastes the body's resources for nothing. Nature built an incredibly complex machine capable of composing symphonies and launching rockets into space, but forgot to install a simple fuse on the data bus between the eyes and the nose. We build self-driving cars, design colonies on Mars, and inject artificial intelligence into every aspect of life. Yet a third of humanity remains hostage to a ridiculous typo in the genome, one that emerged millions of years ago in the first warm-blooded creatures. We are vulnerable to plain sunlight. Our high-tech civilization faces this daily. The most complex processes, from piloting fighter jets to microsurgery on the brain, can be instantly derailed by a single spark in our own brainstem. In the end, the Achu syndrome is a reminder of who we really are. Behind the polished facade of intellect, self-awareness, and all our civilizational achievements lies the same ancient, error-prone biological machine. We can rewrite the laws of physics, reshape the planet to our liking, and peer into the depths of the universe. But the moment we step out of a dark room and look up at the sky, our body obediently reminds us that we're still running on primitive, crackling wiring built millions of years ago. And that ancient code? There's no update for it.